So, while most of you were asleep last night, the Pentagon quietly let something slip that the entire Iranian high command is probably reading right now over their morning tea. The Iran ceasefire, if you can still call it that with a straight face, is now officially on life support, and President Trump didn't exactly sugarcoat it. Standing in the Oval Office, he described Iran's latest peace proposal as, direct quote, a piece of garbage. He said he didn't even finish reading it. And when a reporter asked whether the ceasefire was still holding, his exact words were, and I'm quoting again, "I would say it's one of the weakest right now. It's on life support." That's not diplomatic language. That's a man who's done negotiating with people who aren't negotiating in good faith. But here's what makes today different from every other day this conflict has escalated. NBC News confirmed last night that the Pentagon is actively discussing renaming the Iran operation from Operation Epic Fury to Operation Sledgehammer. And that name change is not just a branding decision, even though it absolutely is that too. It is also legal architecture. A new operation name effectively restarts the 60-day war powers resolution clock, giving the Trump administration fresh congressional runway to go back in and, as they would put it, finish the job. So the name itself is a message. Sledgehammer. Not a scalpel, not a calibrated response, a sledgehammer. And today we are going to walk through exactly what that hammer would actually hit. The targeting list, the airframes, the specific weapons systems, and the strategic sequence of how that operation would unfold if this ceasefire finally stops pretending to be a ceasefire. Plus, we're going to cover the Iranian IRGC, Navy's latest move that should be on every admiral's briefing slide this morning, because they just did something that didn't just expand their defensive posture, it accidentally expanded the U.S. military's target list by a factor of 10. Then about 3/4 of the way through, we've got the global roundup, all the breaking stories from around the world you need in one place, and then we close with the 4D chess strategic analysis on what Iran's actual endgame looks like and why they keep making moves that look insane until you understand the clock they're watching. Let's get into it. First, the operational picture, because there's a lot that's shifted in the last 24 hours, and context matters. The ceasefire has technically been in place since April 8th, brokered by Pakistan. And yes, we are going to talk about Pakistan, because the situation with Pakistan as mediator is somehow both completely predictable and still jaw-dropping every time you look at it directly. But right now, the U.S. military footprint in the region is reportedly larger than it was at the start of Operation Epic Fury. Let that land for a second. You have a supposed ceasefire in effect, and the United States has more troops in theater now than when active major combat operations were ongoing. 2 carrier strike groups, a Marine Expeditionary Unit, likely several hundred Air Force fighter jets positioned strategically across the region, F-35s, F-15Es, and F-16CJs. That last one is worth explaining because most people don't know what the CJ variant actually does. The F-16CJ flies into contested airspace and acts as deliberate bait. It wants Iranian surface-to-air missile systems to turn on their radars and take a shot, because the moment they do, the CJ collects that radar emission, geolocates the battery, and either passes that data to other platforms or drops on it directly. The pilots flying those missions are volunteering to be the thing that gets shot at so that the entire SAM network can be mapped and neutralized. There are no adequate words for what that requires mentally and physically, but that is the kind of force posture you build when you're not planning to leave. And then there's the other thing that happened quietly this week. The Air Force awarded Boeing a contract exceeding $100 million to restock GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator bombs. That is the 30,000-pound weapon carried exclusively by the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber, the same weapon used against Iran's hardened nuclear facilities during Operation Midnight Hammer in June of 2025. And now the Pentagon is restocking them at exactly the moment that a new operation called Sledgehammer is being discussed. That is not a coincidence. That is a shopping list. You don't restock the specific weapon that punches through 200 feet of reinforced concrete unless you're planning to punch through something. Now let's talk about what Iran just did, because this is the part that made every military planner in CENTCOM simultaneously frustrated and delighted. Rear Admiral Mohammad Akbarzadeh, Deputy Political Director of the IRGC Navy, publicly confirmed on May 12th that Iran has expanded its operational definition of the Strait of Hormuz, not the original 21 nautical mile choke point around Hormuz and Hengam Islands that everyone has been focused on for the past several months. A full crescent stretching from Ras Al Jar in the east to Sur Island in the west. That is 200 to 300 nautical miles, roughly 10 times larger than the area they were previously claiming. Now, in the IRGC's mind, this is a power move. They're saying, we don't just own the choke point, we own the entire operating environment. But here's what that actually does in practical military terms. When you declare 300 nautical miles of international waters to be under your operational authority, you have just handed the opposing Air Force a 300 nautical mile target list. Iran didn't just expand their zone of influence, they expanded the B-1's target list. They expanded the F-15E's target list. They expanded the B-2's flight plan. Every IRGC installation, command node, fast attack boat staging area, drone cache, an underground missile facility that falls within that expanded zone is now fair game under the same legal framework the U.S. has been operating under since this conflict started. The IRGC thought they were announcing strength. What they actually did was draw a much bigger map and then hand the U.S. military a pen and say, here, circle everything you want to hit. It would be funny if the stakes weren't so high. And then there's Pakistan, which deserves its own moment here. Pakistan has positioned itself as the primary mediator in U.S.-Iran talks, hosting the highest-level direct negotiations between Washington and Tehran since 1979. That sounds impressive, until you remember that satellite imagery has now confirmed an Iranian Air Force, RC-130, a signals intelligence and reconnaissance variant of the C-130 Hercules, one of the aircraft Iran received from the United States back before the revolution, is currently parked at Nur Khan Air Base, about 10 kilometers from Islamabad, Pakistan's capital. A foreign military intelligence aircraft parked near the capital of the country that is actively mediating peace talks between that foreign military and the United States. If Pakistan were a friend at a party, it would be the kind of friend who offers to hold your wallet while you go to the bathroom and then acts completely shocked when your credit cards are somehow maxed out by the time you get back. We don't think of Pakistan as an adversary publicly. We have to keep them close. But the idea that they're a neutral, honest broker in these negotiations requires a level of suspension of disbelief that not even Hollywood could ask for. All right, the roundup section, because the rest of the world kept moving while we were focused on the Strait. France is preparing to deploy Tiger attack helicopters aboard naval frigates near the Strait of Hormuz, following their proven performance against Iranian drones during UAE-based tests in March. French Navy Admiral Thibault de Poncin confirmed that the Tiger's 30mm cannon and 20 rocket pods made it genuinely effective against the drone threat, creating a low-cost defensive layer that existing naval air defenses weren't designed to provide. France showing up to the barbecue at 10:45 at night when the grill is basically out of coals, but they brought actual filet mignon in the form of these attack helicopters, so we'll take it. President Trump arrived in Beijing for a 36-hour summit with President Xi, accompanied by a delegation that included Elon Musk, Tim Cook, Larry Fink, Boeing's Kelly Ortberg, essentially every major American CEO with something to gain or lose from the U.S.-China relationship. The agenda covers trade, AI export controls, Taiwan, and obviously the Iran conflict. Trump made clear the U.S. isn't asking for China's help, but the subtext of this whole summit is, we need you to stop sending Iran anything that can shoot down our aircraft. Electro-optical seekers, high-resolution satellite imagery, anything that makes Iran's remaining platforms more dangerous. Meanwhile, the U.S. just finalized a roughly $25 billion arms deal to Taiwan, which was also presumably on the agenda, possibly discussed over what must have been a very quiet, very tense dinner. Now let's get into what Operation Sledgehammer would actually look like, because the name is only as meaningful as the targeting list behind it. Layer 1 of any resumed major combat operation almost certainly involves the B-2 Spirit and the GBU-57, the massive ordnance penetrator that the Pentagon just restocked. These go after hardened underground sites, nuclear-related facilities, ballistic missile storage, the underground drone manufacturing complexes that we know Iran has been expanding throughout the ceasefire period. The reason Iran builds fake bunkers, specifically designed to look like real ones, is because they understand that these weapons are expensive, time-consuming to produce, and finite in number. They want to make the U.S. waste them on empty holes in the ground. The intelligence targeting chain on that problem involves the RC-135 rivet joint, the signals intelligence aircraft we've seen operating in the region, mapping emissions from command and control nodes, identifying which facilities are actually active and which ones are decoys, and building a sequenced targeting package that maximizes real damage while burning as few of those precious bunker busters as possible. Layer 2 involves the B-1 Lancer carrying GBU-72 advanced 5,000-pound penetrators hitting the next tier of hardened targets, IRGC command nodes along the coastline, the infrastructure that supports the fast attack boat swarms, the staging areas for the drone campaigns that Iran has been running against UAE and Kuwait throughout this so-called ceasefire. The F-15E Strike Eagle complements this with its own 5,000-pound payload capability and its ability to operate in a much more flexible reactive targeting role, and then the F-35 threading through the entire network, suppressing air defenses, passing targeting data, and putting terminal guidance on anything that moves in a way that the larger platforms can't. That is a layered, sequenced, synchronized targeting architecture. And the fact that the Pentagon is discussing a name change rather than a withdrawal tells you everything about the direction of travel here. And that brings us to the 4D chess section, because Iran's strategy throughout this entire conflict makes more sense once you understand the one clock they're actually watching. It's not the military clock, it's the American political clock. The midterms are coming. Gas prices are the single most visible economic indicator for the average American voter. Iran's calculation, and it's not a stupid one, is that if they can drag this blockade and these negotiations and this on-again, off-again ceasefire long enough, the political pressure from rising energy costs will eventually force the Trump administration to accept a deal on worse terms just to bring prices down before November. That's why their 5-point counterproposal, the one Trump called a piece of garbage, was never designed to be accepted. It was designed to be rejected loudly and publicly, to eat up weeks of news cycles and diplomatic bandwidth while the clock runs down. Every day the Strait stays disrupted is another day Iran didn't get bombed. And every day they don't get bombed is another day they're rebuilding stockpiles, repositioning fast attack assets, and waiting for American political will to soften. The problem with that strategy is that they're losing $500 million a day while they wait. The IRGC's middle-tier commanders, the ones who don't have the golden castles to fall back on, the ones whose families feel the economic pain directly, those are the people who start making the calculations that break regimes. Iran thinks they can outlast American political will. The United States is betting that Iran's economic pain breaks their internal cohesion before the midterms change Washington's appetite. And Operation Sledgehammer, if it launches, is the statement that the bet is off the table and the math is being settled the old-fashioned way. So what do you think? Does the ceasefire hold another week? Does Sledgehammer drop? Drop your read in the comments below. I read every one of them, and I try to respond to as many as I can within the first 2 hours after this goes up. Follow me on X and Instagram, links in the description. If you want the members-only deep dives, join the Ready Room. I'll see you on the next one. Signing off.